Breaking news out of La Liga, where Real Madrid has agreed to mutually part ways with first-team coach Xabi Alonso. In a statement, the team said Real Madrid CF announces that by mutual agreement between the club and Xabi Alonso, it has been decided to end his time as first-team coach. Xabi Alonso will always have the affection and admiration of all Madrid fans because he is a Real Madrid legend and has always represented the values of our club. Real Madrid will always be his home. Our club thanks Xabi Alonso and his entire technical team for their work and dedication during this time and wishes them the best of luck in this new stage of their lives. The move comes just 7 months into his time in charge at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid sit in second in the league, 4 points off rivals Barcelona, who they lost to this past weekend in the Supercopa de España final. Nico Cantor is alongside me, Chris Whittingham. And Nico, I guess we'll just start with your first reaction. Are you surprised that this was the final straw, lost in the Super Cup in Saudi Arabia, and that this is when they decide to make the change?
From the outset, no, I'm not surprised because the media in Spain had been teasing that losing a Super Cup could be the final straw. Now let's look at the manner in which that it happened. Real Madrid started to pick up steam. It felt like Xabi Alonso had bought himself a little bit more oxygen to see this time out. And the narrative around Spain was that Barcelona are so much better than Real Madrid. Barcelona are going to toy with this Real Madrid in the Supercopa final, and it didn't end up being the case. I wonder if Xabi Alonso was really a Carreras miss away, a Raúl Asensio header away from still having a job. Like, are we talking about these fine margins? And what I'm surprised at is that nobody last night in Spain was hinting of Xabi Alonso losing his job the very next day. Nobody was saying, well, Florentino's really talking and really considering sacking, because we have seen in the last month or so this Real Madrid team take strides forward. Now, in the grand scheme of things, has Real Madrid improved? Has Xabi Alonso reached close to an 100% of how he wants to leave his stamp on Real Madrid? No. But they're only 4 points away in La Liga. So this mutually agreed to part ways, I'm not sure I buy it, because this is a man who you would want to center a project around. It's going to take some time, just that Real Madrid isn't the same thing as Bayer Leverkusen, where you do have time to build a project around.
I think that would probably be the reason why. We're 7 months in, as you mentioned. The Club World Cup was kind of its own thing. You come straight into a new season. But I think when you look at this club, there is a feeling that he was never going to be able to get his project fully off the ground because it requires buy-in from the club and from the players. I think that's the biggest thing that we didn't see. Yeah. It just didn't seem like he connected with Vini Jr., with Rodrigo, even to a lesser extent Mbappe. Obviously, he is still scoring tons of goals, but there just didn't seem to be an obvious fit. And is this result maybe a reason why it's sort of a cover for, well, this was going to happen eventually? It just didn't look like it was going to happen for him.
But then why do you go out and hire Xabi Alonso in the first place if he's this manager that loves his mythology, that loves his intricacies, his complex football, his versatility, players buying into this certain style of play, right? If you're going to hire him just because he used to play for Real Madrid and he kind of fits the mold, you got to ask yourself, does he fit the mold really? Because you're going to need buy-in from players to play this very complex, modern style of football. And at first, Xabi Alonso really tried to impose that in certain games, and he lost badly against Atletico Madrid. And there were a couple of performances that weren't convincing. He actually won the first Clásico, right? But then you started to see the dynamic shift a little bit and empower the players. And then almost symbolically yesterday, now we're starting to see videos of Xabi Alonso telling the players to do the guard of honor for Barcelona, and Mbappe saying, no, we don't want to do it. And then Vinicius getting subbed off first in El Clásico, pouting about. And then yesterday, and arguably his best individual game of the season, him still not being able to play a full 90. So there's just questions here or there about who had the power, who was the one really making the calls, and the direction of this project. Maybe Florentino Perez realized this isn't the man to get this group of players and usher them into an evolution beyond Carlo Ancelotti. It just kind of felt like what Xabi Alonso ended up doing was less of what he believed and a little bit more about what Carlo Ancelotti imposed into the culture of Real Madrid. And it does feel like the Ancelotti project or the Ancelotti way of managing ran its course. And it felt like Madrid needed to change. But they didn't. The momentum shifted a little bit in favor of Xabi Alonso when results, or at least performances, didn't go his way. It reverted back to players in power. And I think now that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves. Who's calling the shots? Who are the people in charge? Because if the players who have been given a certain entitlement, because to some point they deserved it, but if they're the ones fully in power, it feels like it isn't sustainable. And now Álvaro Arbeloa from Real Madrid Castilla, the youth team of Real Madrid, where it's a club that he has played for, Arbeloa, where he got his coaching licenses, where he has grown and groomed into a manager from being a former player. He is now at Real Madrid. He's an institution man, if you will. And this is going to be his first taste of managing. And it goes beyond the tactics. It's managing the players. It's managing the egos. And
managing up to boardroom level.
So having all of that in place, it's going to be very difficult. And good luck to him. But I wonder how this sacking will empower a Vini that wasn't happy. An Mbappe that told his managers, no, I don't want to do the guard of honor. Who's going to claim the stake? It feels like now Arbeloa coming into the dressing room, there is this necessity for somebody to be the alpha, someone to lead this team. And I wonder where all the chips will fall. I don't know. That's the answer.
I think the question is what kind of coach can they attract from here. But we're getting reactions from you, the viewer, right now. We're live on YouTube on the CBS Sports Golazo YouTube, reacting to the news that Xabi Alonso is no longer the Real Madrid head coach. And we actually are taking some of your comments, and we'll get one of them now on air. And one of them says, players don't want to work hard. He tried. I think that is the ultimate thing here, is that you see a lot of teams around the world that are systems teams. Now, Pep Guardiola is Manchester City as much as any player is. I think you see a lot of coaches that want to implement high pressing and possession styles and moving players around. It really is a rarity for a club in Real Madrid and a set of players that Real Madrid have to just say, nah, we don't want to do that. And for it to not work in that way. And I think in some ways it is limiting of what they can go and get next. Because we can talk about, Arne Slot, maybe he's in trouble in Liverpool. Will he want to come and manage this club where he doesn't feel like he can put his imprint on things? In some ways, you have to work within the confines that the president puts on you and the players put on you. It is kind of limiting of the kind of coaches, other than the fact that you get to coach Real Madrid, you probably have a good chance of winning the Champions League at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, I agree that especially at Real Madrid, players will have a certain authority. Players will have a certain swagger, a certain aura. To have that demand onto what a manager can expect from me, it's like, okay, I'm not going to buy in to your tactical formations or these defensive phase, offensive phase, whatever it is, when I'm just going to go out there and score 3 goals, right? To a certain extent, that's good because we're talking about the best players in the world. But when that gets out of hand, then it becomes a problem. And it just felt like under Carlo Ancelotti, that sense of forward progress was lost because Vini felt a little bit too empowered, because perhaps Jude felt a little bit too empowered. And then the whole Ballon d'Or ceremony debacle happened, and Real Madrid hasn't been the same since. So I wonder, again, if Arbeloa is the right guy, maybe until the summer they'll find somebody else afterwards, because through the official statement of Real Madrid, we haven't really had specifications of what is there to come next. They just said Arbeloa is hired. How this is all going to play out beyond this summer, mind you, Arbeloa might come in and win the Champions League, and we're back to square one.
It's absolutely
classic Real Madrid.
Yeah.
But I feel like getting rid of Xabi Alonso so fast will have some sort of ripple effect into the dressing room. Because when they got rid of El Indio Solari, who came in? Zidane came back.
Right.
And it was Zidane's team.
See, Adam's waiting around for the French national team job. I don't know if he's going to be the knight in shining armor this time, but obviously Real Madrid have to find a longer-term solution. Another comment coming in from PH5145 who says, nice way to scapegoat a solid coach. I think the Xabi Alonso narrative will be interesting going forward. Now, where is he going to end up? But again, you're joining us live now in the midst of breaking news out of La Liga, where Real Madrid has agreed to mutually part ways with first-team coach Xabi Alonso. In a statement, the team said, Real Madrid CF announces that by mutual agreement between the club and Xabi Alonso, it has been decided to end his time as first-team coach. Xabi Alonso will always have the affection and admiration of all Madrid fans because he is a Real Madrid legend and has always represented the values of our club. Real Madrid will always be his home. Our club thanks Xabi Alonso and his entire technical team for their work and dedication during this time and wishes him the best of luck in this new stage of their lives. The move comes just 7 months into his time in charge at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid sit in second in the league, 4 points off rivals Barcelona, who they lost to this past weekend in the Supercopa de España final. And for more on this, we bring in our Spanish football expert, Phil Cutrumalides. And Phil, obviously this will send shockwaves around Spanish football. What's your immediate reaction to this news, Phil?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I think Nico was very charitable when he was talking about nobody in Spain was predicting this. I was on the show last night saying, yeah, I don't think Xabi Alonso is going to lose his job tonight. I think he should be okay. And then boom, it happens today instead of last night. It was a surprise that it happened because generally the narrative being spun was actually, as Nico was suggesting, Real Madrid did okay in that final against a Barcelona side that were clearly superior to them. They didn't get spanked, they competed, and as Nico said, they were 2 very good chances away from leveling things up. But what is the problem for Real Madrid and what has cost Xabi Alonso his job is that there has been a real concern around the performances, and we haven't seen any real improvement in the performances over the last couple of months. There's been nothing, and even in yesterday when people were saying, oh, well, they didn't get spanked and maybe there's something we can hold on to, there was nothing you could grab onto and say, there, that's what you need to do, that's the plan going forward, because there hasn't seemed to be a plan for Real Madrid in terms of their play for the last 2 months. And in Spanish, there's a great phrase, I'm not sure how to translate it, El Madrid no juega a nada. Real Madrid just don't play anything. They don't play any football. And we haven't seen them be creative. We haven't seen them take the game to another team. And I'm not talking about just about Barcelona. I'm talking about when they're at home to Sevilla, when they're at home to Celta Vigo, when they go to places like Alaves. Those games, they might have got positive results in a couple of them, but the performances have been really poor. So coming into this final, they had won 5 games in a row, but that almost didn't matter. That almost didn't matter, certainly not to the hierarchy at the club, because the feeling around how Real Madrid was playing was so negative, and it was actually increasingly negative. And I think the first half last night, where not much happened for the first 30 minutes, Real Madrid were pretty well set up defensively to try and nullify Barcelona, and then there was a crazy end to the half, and it was 2-2. But in that first half, Real Madrid were sitting deep. Real Madrid were not doing anything in an offensive way, and the hierarchy didn't like that. The Real Madrid president did not like that. You cannot set up your Real Madrid team to face Barcelona like that in a final, even if the caveat being, well, there's no other way that we can really play this Barcelona side because we don't have the tools to attack them any other way. This is how we have to play this. But the image that Real Madrid gave in that game, particularly in the first half and in the last couple of months, has been so negative. Remember, after the game that they lost against Celta Vigo, which was on the 7th of December, they lost 2-0 at the Bernabeu. There were a number of members of the board who wanted Xabi Alonso out there and then on the 7th of December. And there was a general feeling that he had lost confidence in the hierarchy. Florentino Perez, there was a big meeting from all the socios of the Real Madrid members, the annual meeting. He didn't come out and back Xabi Alonso then. There was a Christmas get-together, the annual traditional Christmas get-together of the press that cover Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, and Florentino spoke then. He didn't back Xabi Alonso then. There was generally a feeling that he didn't have the backing of the hierarchy. And despite those 5 wins in a row, it's not been enough to save his job. And out he goes. And the general feeling is, and we're just reacting to this news that has broken in the last 45 minutes or so, I think people feel sorry for Xabi Alonso. People feel that it hasn't necessarily, okay, he has made some mistakes and his team hasn't played very good football, no juega nada, but he hasn't necessarily had the tools to do what he wanted to do at Real Madrid.
Well,
we've talked about this before on the show. This is a really poorly configured squad. It's unbalanced. The way that they tried to set up this squad, there's no deep lying playmaker. There's 3 players that want to play on the left. There's nobody that really wants to play on the right. It's, what else was he supposed to do?
So surely this isn't fully Xavi's fault, right? I go back to the Manchester City game where they competed really well but still lost in the Bernabeu. It had come after a string of questionable results, but it almost felt like the Bernabeu was encouraged by the way that Real Madrid was playing. All right, we lost, but there was this fighting spirit that the team hadn't been showing us, and it seemed like, at least from a spirit point of view, they had turned the corner, and then they went on the string of results, and then into the Supercopa, we said, all right, Xabi Alonso has got a little bit more footing than he had a month ago. Then he was competing. At least he competed with Atletico Madrid, maybe not the best team on the night, but still won and got to the final. And yesterday, he was Álvaro Carreras' miss away from sending that game into penalty kicks and possibly winning the whole thing. So is Xabi Alonso sacking a matter of centimeters, inches, because one guy missed a sitter that he should have put away?
No, because I think it was coming because of the general feeling around how the team was playing. And remember, you're absolutely right. That game against Manchester City, that came off the back of them losing at home to Celta Vigo. 3 days later, they were playing Manchester City, and people were thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to get absolutely torn apart here by City. And they didn't. It was 2-1 to Manchester City. Real Madrid played okay for parts of that game, but they still lost. The thing is, Real Madrid can get up for those kind of games. They can get up for Manchester City and compete and still lose. They can get up for the game against Barcelona and compete and still lose. But it's the other matches where teams sit a little bit deep, where teams invite pressure on from Real Madrid, and they have to try and figure out a way to try and break them down. They can't do it. The system isn't in place to figure out those kind of games, and those are the kind of games that win you the league title, which Real Madrid looked miles off doing. And I know it's only 4 points that they're behind Barcelona, but in terms of feeling, in terms of sensations, there's a massive gap between them and Barcelona right now. So it's because of the performances, not because of the results. It's because of the performances that Xabi Alonso has lost his job. Now, whose fault is that? Well, that's a different question. And there was actually an online survey done by one of the big sports papers here, Marca, at the end of December. Who do you blame for Real Madrid's positions? And the vast percentage we're blaming the players. The vast percentage were blaming the players of people who voted in that, rather than Xabi Alonso. There is a feeling that they, as one of our viewers right now, one of the comments there, the players didn't want to work hard enough. How much truth there is to that? I think there might be a smidgen of it, because we've seen in certain games, for the big ones, they can get up for it. For other games, they struggle.
Thanks, Phil. And Phil is our Spanish football expert. Phil Cuchamilides reacting live to the news that Xabi Alonso is out as first-team head coach of Real Madrid. We actually want to put up a poll right now. Should Real Madrid have fired Xabi Alonso? This is live in the YouTube comments right now. The answer is no at 73%. Phil, I guess I'll ask you, does that surprise you? I think it's time now to talk about his successor, Álvaro Arbeloa, who was the coach at Real Madrid Castilla, obviously a right back for the club down the years. Tell us a bit about him. And I guess my question to you would be is there a different coach that could unlock much more out of this team than what we've seen so far out of the season? Could a few training sessions from Arbeloa, a different shift in emphasis, completely change things for Real Madrid?
So the last time a manager of Real Madrid Castilla took over the club in January, he led them to the Champions League title, and that was Zinedine Zidane 10 years ago. So, there is a precedent for this. Whether Álvaro Arbeloa is the man to do that, I'm not entirely sure. But his Real Madrid Castilla side, they're a decent side to watch. They're an attacking team, and he's worked really closely with a lot of young players and managed to get them up to a standard where we've seen young players coming through and coming into the first team this season. We've seen the likes of Gonzalo Garcia obviously break in, but Valdepeñas make his debut. Joan Martinez is there as well. So he's someone who's got a clear idea of youth academy, those young players, and knows who's ready to come into the first team. I think it's a massive, massive jump up for any coach to come from Castilla to the Real Madrid first team job. Álvaro Arbeloa is a club man, much like Zinedine Zidane was in his day. Ended his playing career and gone straight in working for the club, first in the sort of ambassadorial capacity and then as a coach, and he's worked his way up, and now he's been given a chance. I think there's also maybe a little twist, a little quirk of fate. Álvaro Arbeloa and Xabi Alonso really good friends, like really, really, really close friends. So it's something a little bit curious that one is taking over from the other. Is he the man to turn things round? I don't know. And I don't know if he has the charisma and the aura needed to maybe get more out of the players than Xabi Alonso managed to get. I think his style of management is not a million miles away from Xabi Alonso in terms of man management, but maybe he will have seen how that went down with some of the dressing room and might have to tweak things. But he's a club man. You talk about pressure from the boardroom on Arbeloa. He will know exactly what he's getting into. He's not necessarily going to make any kind of demands. This is what I've got. These are the players I've got. I will try and work with what I've got. And I'm fascinated to see how they get on Wednesday night. They're away to Albacete in the cup, potential banana skin. So that's going to be Álvaro Arbeloa's first game in charge.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's very difficult to impose yourself in a dressing room because there's like very few places where Arbeloa can say, listen, I won 2 Champions Leagues. I won a plethora of titles with this club, and walk into that dressing room and say, I'm the man, where everybody else has won the same thing, right? You need to have a certain command. There's people in the comments saying Florentino Perez is to blame. Xabi Alonso wanted and needed a midfielder in the ilk of Zubimendi, and Perez failed him in recruitment. I think we've been talking a little bit about this, about the lack of balance in the squad, which is something that wasn't addressed in Ancelotti's last year since Toni Kroos retired. And then another comment says, Xavi should never have been fired. Madrid should not have bought Mbappe with no plan for Vini. They occupy the same place. I'm less in favor of that and more in favor about the midfielder that kind of sets the tempo for Real Madrid, Phil. It's kind of like the writing has been on the wall. They got rid of a manager who couldn't have the team play well convincingly, and they bring in a guy that is all about the methodology, excuse me, I'm struggling with that word today, but the methodology, and they don't give him the time, they don't give him, or they don't find him the players, and especially now in January where Real Madrid historically doesn't like signing players, they can't even correct course halfway through the season.
No, it's pretty wild. I mean, nobody's expecting Real Madrid to go out and bring anyone in January because, as you said, historically, they haven't. Barcelona have, by the way, bringing in João Cancelo and strengthening their squad, but Real Madrid seemingly unlikely to do any business. I just want to go back to something that I think Chris mentioned before. Was this a good fit from the inception, Xabi Alonso for Real Madrid? And going back to the summer, we were all kind of excited and kind of intrigued how it would get on because we knew what he'd done previously at Bayer Leverkusen, but we were also aware of how he had achieved what he had achieved there. And I think there was a little bit of a suspicion, but also intrigue to see how he would be able to implement his methods on the Real Madrid dressing room. And we just go back to, again, these kinds of extremely sort of focused, controlling, man-managing coaches haven't necessarily flourished at Real Madrid over the last few years. And you look at the likes of Rafa Benitez, and Julian Lopetegui, and now Xabi Alonso, managers who they were all former Real Madrid players, all former people who knew the club really, really well. Obviously, Xabi Alonso, the most successful and high profile and with the biggest aura. But they all knew what they were getting into, and none of them was able to impose their philosophy, their style, their ideas on this dressing room. And that's why it is the hardest job in the world, the hardest job in the world. And it's a real shame that Xabi Alonso hasn't flourished because we were excited to see whether or not he would. He was one of the top young coaches in the world. It was an exciting, forward-thinking, progressive appointment by Real Madrid in the summer, which has fallen flat on its face 7 months later.
But plenty of people still want that job, right? Phil Kitchen-Melita, our Spanish football expert. Thank you so much for joining us on this day of breaking news.
Pleasure, guys.
And again, that breaking news is that Real Madrid have agreed to mutually part ways with first-team coach Xabi Alonso. In a statement, the team said, Real Madrid CF announces that by mutual agreement between the club and Xabi Alonso, it has been decided to end his time as first-team coach. Xabi Alonso will always have the affectionate admiration of all Madrid fans because he is a Real Madrid legend and has always represented the values of our club. Real Madrid will always be his home. Our club thanks Xabi Alonso and his entire technical team for their work and dedication during this time and wishes them the best of luck in this new stage of their lives. The move comes to 7 months into his time in charge at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid sit in second in La Liga, 4 points off rivals Barcelona, who they lost to this past weekend in the Supercopa de España final. We will have much more reaction on the CBS Sports Golazo YouTube channel, as well as on the CBS Sports Golazo network, available wherever you find your streaming channels. This is big news. I will have it covered for you right here on CBS.